Advertising is part of our daily lives. From the ludicrous to the informative, advertising is a complex science but can be explained relatively easily by psychological theorem. The key feature of advertising is persuasion, persuading the watching consumer to buy products, social learning theory being a key part of this. But what is social learning theory and how is it relevant to advertising? Bandura originally presented this theory after his famous experiment that children learnt behaviour from observation. His theory explained why certain actions are learnt by observation in a few simple stages. First, the person observing the behaviour has to identify with the role model performing an action. Once observed, that behaviour has to be imitated. For this to occur, social learning theory explains how the spectator must be motivated to do so. This is often due to watching the role models being positively or negatively reinforced, leading to the observer's own vicarious reinforcement. When advertisers use this theory, it is important that the observing people understand what item is being sold, even if it is not made clear at the beginning, so long as the item used by the role model is associated with some form of reinforcement along the way. However, the footage being shown of the actual Bandura experiment makes it seem hard to see how these results could lead to the basis of most modern advertising. However, when analysed, it becomes obvious to see. Take for instance the famous Milky Bar adverts. In this advert, the Milky Bar kid eats one chocolate bar right at the beginning, the behaviour being observed. He is then positively reinforced by the fact he becomes popular, or negatively reinforced by getting rid of the bad guys. All this makes the observer become vicariously reinforced, and thus is motivated to repeat the behaviour of eating a Milky Bar. Role models are of course one of the most important parts of this theory, and that is why they are so important in advertising. For instance, in the Milky Bar Kid adverts, their target population is children, and that is why the children are predominant in their adverts. They are also so important that some adverts primarily just rely on role models, none more obviously than the Gillette adverts. In this advert, it is clear that although the reinforcement may not be strong, the use of role models is good enough to make people wish to buy the product.
Classical conditioning is another key concept used in advertising. Classical conditioning starts with an unconditioned stimulus which causes an unconditioned response. The unconditioned stimulus is then paired with a conditioned stimulus, which results in the unconditioned response. This is repeated until the response becomes provoked by the conditioned stimulus alone. Advertisers pair an involuntary behaviour with a product using ideas from this concept. For example, when products are endorsed by attractive people, this provokes a response of arousal. The consumer then associates the product with this response and buys the product. Operant conditioning is when someone is rewarded for a desired behaviour, which leads to this behaviour being repeated. Operant conditioning comes into advertising alongside vicarious reinforcement. If the observer is aroused by the imagery used in the ad alongside the product, then they will associate the product with this feeling of arousal. This means they will be more likely to buy the product in order to achieve the effect of the imagery.
There is much evidence to support these ideas used in advertising. In 1920, Watson and Rayner demonstrated how classical conditioning can be effectively applied to humans through the traumatization of an infant, little Albert. Using the principles of classical conditioning, the experimenters were able to make him afraid of objects he had previously found entertaining. 40 years later, Bandura, Ross and Ross showed how children will imitate adult role model behaviour. This experiment demonstrated how behaviour is not just shaped by reward and punishment, but through observed behaviour. In 1968, Pickens and Thompson investigated operant conditioning in rats. It was found that cocaine could be used to reinforce behaviours including pressing a lever. Advertising can be effective through almost any medium, from posters to cinema adverts. Specific types of people are targeted depending on what is being advertised, using wording and imagery, from children to pensioners. Every advert has a target audience, and this may be according to age, social class, gender, or even hair colour. There are a number of concepts behind all advertisements we see in everyday life, from the use of role models to operant conditioning. However, their purpose is always the same, in order to sell their products.